Well, some 60 years later, no one has even come close to breaking the nation's longest winning streak in college football, held by OU's Bud Wilkinson. Wilkinson coached the Sooners from 1947 to 1963, winning 14 conference titles and becoming the first collegiate football coach to host a national television show aptly named The Bud Wilkinson Show. Now, Wilkinson was also remarkable for compiling this record while showing a genuine interest and concern for the performance of his players in the classroom. But it is his role as a father and mentor that is chronicled in the book Dear Jay, Love Dad. Earlier, I was able to catch up with the book's author, Jay Wilkinson, after he spoke with a group of career tech superintendents about the lessons he learned from a series of letters from father to son. Jay, if you would give us some insights into the man we didn't necessarily see out on the football field.
Well, I think the fact that he was such a loving and caring father, filled with support and encouragement to my older brother Pat and to me from the time we grew up. I think that people used to think perhaps our household was different than my friends growing up, but the only thing that was different really was that our father was famous, and he was on the cover of newspaper magazines and on television quite a bit. But he was a very concerned father that demonstrated just an immense amount of love and support for both of his sons.
Is there a reoccurring theme when you look back at these letters that were written more than half a century ago? Is there a reoccurring theme and philosophy in his writings?
I think that probably the most important was his encouragement and support. I'd wanted to play football for him. I grew up as a high school quarterback at Norman, and I understood the system. I could run the split T option pretty well, but both my mom and dad taught my older brother Pat and me, and we knew that he had an iconic stature, not only in Oklahoma, but throughout the country, and they both felt that my brother and I would be better served if we went out and gained our own identity. So it was a very difficult decision for me to leave that great tradition of Oklahoma with him as the coach, but he supported it and certainly felt that it was the right thing to do.
When I was a very lonesome, homesick young student at Duke University who had just left Norman, and he wrote, "Whenever a person leaves a pleasant situation to enter the unknown, there is always the realization of how nice and good and comfortable things were before. Yet only by facing the future and taking on progressively more difficult assignments are we able to grow. You will grow and develop in direct relationship to the way you meet and overcome what seem to be hard assignments."
His philosophy in the letters, I think, show a very worldly, scholarly, erudite man. He was known as a professorial coach, very soft-spoken, never raised his voice, no profanities of any type. And that's the way he was as a father, just lending, I think, wisdom, guidance, and encouragement in just about every phase of life.
Now, you went on to school at a very prestigious school, Duke University, played football there, and that was in some very tumultuous times. And the letters, they're really a reflection of those times, are they not?
Well, there were, and it was a time period between 1960 and 1966, and of course, that was a time where we witnessed the assassination of President John Kennedy and then the build-up to the Vietnam War. And it was a very chaotic a time when our country was extremely divided, so it was a very emotional experience, I think, for anybody growing up then.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev actually tried to place missiles in Cuba, John Kennedy was our president. And I was in the middle of our football season my junior year at Duke, and I was very frightened. I was very concerned about the possible outbreak of nuclear war. And my dad wrote a letter which I think really summarizes what can be learned from athletics, and in this instance, football for the future, when he wrote, "Mom said you told her football didn't seem too important now. Actually, Jay, it never has been an end in itself. Although people distort the idea, the game is fundamentally education for the participants. As Admiral Byrd said, it isn't getting to the pole that counts, it's what you learn along the way." This is the best brief analysis of football. It isn't winning or losing that has lasting value or importance. The effort, the dedication, the sacrifice you make for a cause, for your team, working with others for a common, most demanding goal is what matters. The loyalties, the joys, the disappointments, and above all, learning to give your total best, mentally, emotionally, and physically, are the qualities that will make a man, and there is no other place they are learned so well. You will learn as you grow older that your football experience will have given you an inner strength and discipline to meet the vicissitudes of life and fortune with your head high and your banners flying, because you will know what hard, demanding preparation truly is. And that life's challenges come not from outside events, but rather from within, as you strive to be the very best of which you are capable. Whenever you do this, you have literally won regardless of the score.
Now, your father is best known for winning. Now, he still holds records for the NCAA. But he had experienced failure, as we all do in life. He had an unsuccessful Senate campaign.
He did, and he used to kiddingly like to say that when people asked him to speak about politics after he was defeated, he said that defeated generals do not discuss the arts of war. And so he didn't want to do that. But he felt, I always felt that his loss in 1964 was the biggest disappointment that he ever experienced, other than the loss of his mother, who died when he was just 7 years old. We knew it was going to be a tough race, and it was, I think he would have won any other year, except it was the Johnson landslide over Barry Goldwater, and my dad just couldn't pick up enough votes crossing over. But he learned at a young age that you don't dwell on the past, and you just go forward. And I think that was one of his great strengths. Even though it was a very hurtful time, I know he felt that there was no way over half of the citizens of Oklahoma would vote against him. And of course, that did happen.
My dad wrote, many people, in fact, the majority of people, react to events. They never cause things to happen. Only by defining your goals, planning how to achieve them, and preparing properly, are you able to cause things to happen your way instead of reacting to events stimulated by others.
In addition to that defeat, when I went away to Duke, ironically, he had always had winning seasons. And as you just mentioned, the great winning streaks of 31 and 47 straight games in a row. But my freshman year at Duke and my sophomore year at Duke, Oklahoma had a losing season the first year. And then that second year, they lost their first 5 games and came back to win their last 5 against some outstanding teams. And many people felt that that was his greatest year of coaching ever. But he did, yes. He experienced setbacks, and having served in World War II aboard the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier, he was engaged in Okinawa and Iwo Jima. Many of his friends were killed. He always said if he hadn't been standing behind a still beam when a kamikaze plane hit, he would have been killed too. So he knew that we're just here in this life for a short period of time, and we're here to overcome challenges and obstacles and hopefully to be of service to other people. I think he had a very good philosophy.
Overcoming those setbacks and possible failures, was that a theme in some of the letters that he wrote to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think he always felt, I know he quoted Abe Lincoln several times saying that we can be about as happy as we make up our mind to be. And he knew that challenges, certainly for students, anytime in college you do encounter, I think, self-doubt and uncertainty. But he always emphasized that it was really important just to do the very best you could do. And once you did that, then you didn't really have to worry about much else. It didn't really matter.
Well, Coach Wilkinson certainly knew his X's and O's. He was also a student of philosophy and loved poetry.
He loved poetry, loved philosophy. He was a student of history, and I would say a military analyst, a historian. He went to Shattuck Military School through high school, and I think it was there that he developed his love of books and Shakespeare. I never was a student of Shakespeare, but Dad quoted him quite a bit, and a number of poets from time to time, just to make points, and there was part of his common knowledge in his everyday language.
When my brother Pat and I were in late junior high and high school, our dad gave us a framed poem that I think really crystallizes the theme of integrity. It's called The Man in the Glass, and it goes like this. When you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your mother or father or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. You may be like Jack Horner and chisel a plum and think you're a wonderful guy. But the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. He's the fellow to please. Never mind all the rest, for he's with you, clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass.
You know, I'm thinking these letters were written more than a half a century ago. Can you go back and look at them today and still learn things from him?
Well, I think so. I think that the change that's really taken place today is the way we communicate. Certainly the two of us, we're in the electronic age. I know with my 4 children and my 8 grandchildren, I'm communicating either on my desktop or my BlackBerry 99.9% of the time. But I do know when I take the time to write a note or a letter that it has a different impact. And the fact that it was a different time, but the fact that our father took the time, as busy as he was, to write these letters filled with great not only advice and encouragement, but I would say philosophical wisdom. The fact that he took the time to do it, I think, was very important. The themes, I think, that long ago still remain the same. Those important themes which come out in the book. He talks quite a bit about values. He talks about attitude. He talks about preparation. He talks about perseverance. We both know those are themes today that are just the same. We have to learn how to encounter challenges that we have along the way. But there were so many things he talked about. Other things that were important to him were the will to win, having a burning desire to do your best. Integrity was very important to him. Unselfishness, learning how to set goals, motivation and determination and faith. These were all themes that I think resonate today with all of us. We just have different historical periods of time.
And you may have said it, but preparation.
Oh yeah, preparation is so very important. He was well known for a quote that he repeated frequently to his players, and that was that the will to prepare is more important than the will to win. And the reason he knew that was he knew everybody wanted to win on game day, and that it was only those people who prepared long in advance of an event taking place and then continued to prepare every day would have that consistency of success. And it's really true when it doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, golf, whatever, but I'll just use football as an example. When you kick the ball off and you're playing in front of a large stadium or a large television audience, there's obviously a lot of pressure on you to perform. And that's why practice, he knew, was so important, so that you could perform and play just as you practiced. And that's why he thought it was so very important to prepare.
Now, one of the themes that you talk about in your book from your father is him writing about determination, and he even quoted some poems to you about it.
Yes, one of his favorite poems was Rudyard Kipling's great poem, If. And that was philosophically, of course, it contains so many wonderful messages in just a very short poem itself, but that was one of his favorites.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and pick them up with worn out tools. If you can take one heap of all your winnings and risk it all on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at new beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve its term long after they are gone and still hold on when there is nothing else within you except the will which says to them, go on. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more. You'll be a man, my son.
Do you believe that the power of the written word is even more powerful today in our electronic age?
Well, yes, I do. And I think the reason I do is because we're mostly conditioned today to communicate electronically. Certainly our children, our grandchildren have been brought up with the internet. And I have always believed, even though our communication has changed, that the receipt of any message from any person, if it is in writing, if they've taken the time to craft it and to think it out, that it generally has more of a symbolic and an emotional message than it does if we just knock out an email address per se. So I strongly have always felt, and I try to push myself. I probably communicate 99% of my messages on the internet. But I know that if I take the time to sit down with my stationery and write out a note, that it is a little bit different than if I knock out a message on the internet.
A final question about your father. He's been to the top of the mountain in coaching, the top of the mountain in broadcasting. Of all those successes, is there a certain thing that you think he would be the most proud of?
He was proud of the type of men that he influenced through coaching. And not so much just on the field, but he was always just such a believer that football or all sports are really mechanisms to train athletes for the future. And he always really believed that. He thought that athletes go to college to gain an education, that they're first there to receive an education, and then secondly to perform in sports. And so I know he took enormous pride in the magnificent winning streaks and championships that they had, but I say equally important with the character and with the attitude that his players had long after they left the playing field.
Well, Jay, certainly a fascinating book and a great, easy read. Thank you so much for being here.
So nice being with you.
Thank you. Now, if you'd like to read an excerpt from Dear Jay, Love Dad, Bud Wilkinson's letters to his son, we do have an excerpt on our website and links to where you can buy this book.